Hello, everyone. I was going through my collection of books and articles and magazines recently looking for a particular photograph of an ME-109, and one of the places I looked was this old commemorative magazine that came out in 1964. I didn't find the picture I was looking for in here. But I was really struck. I hadn't looked at this in a long time, and I was really struck by some of the photographs in here, and a lot of other thoughts sort of went through my mind as well. And I just wanted to sort of share them with you and show you this magazine, really dated and tatty now. It's not aged well, but I've still got fond kind of memories of it. So I just wanted to make a video on the subject of this magazine. Now, as I say, this came out in 1964, on the 25th anniversary of the start of the Second World War, or at least the start of the UK's involvement in the Second World War, 1939. I was 10 years old at the time, and it was advertised quite heavily on television, so I was aware of it. And we went. My parents took me on a day trip to Brighton in the summer, and it was on sale in all the newsagents as we went past, and my father bought it for me at East Croydon railway station newsagents on our way home. You can see from the price, 3 shillings, which was quite an expense in those days. Nowadays, not so. It's the equivalent of 15 new pence, but 3 shillings then was, gosh, I think I got sixpence a week pocket money, something like that. So it was an expensive item. That's the first thing that really kind of for my first sort of memory that it invoked was that just that day out in Brighton. And it's one of the reasons really why, I mean, you might be amazed. I mean, it was, what is it, 58 years, something like that, 58 years ago, and I've hung on to it all that time. um I do it simply because I do have a sort of hoarding kind of instinct, but at the same time, I'm far more attached to physical kind of hard copy books and so on than I am to digital images. It's one of the reasons why I will never kind of give up purchasing books and so on. And I'm sort of not antagonistic towards things like Kindle, but I'm averse to purchasing things digitally, PDF copies of war games rules, for instance, or reading books on Kindle. They just don't have any character. Whereas to me, a book has character. Even if I haven't owned it, from new like this. So it's imbued with lots of special memories for me. If I see a book in a second-hand bookshop, I'm still as interested, as much in the hands that it's passed through and previous owners as I am to the actual subject of the book itself. And I just think a book is far more kind of resonant of it invokes far more kind of feelings in me than digital images do. But anyway, the other thing is this was a commemorative magazine. As I say, it's 58 years ago. When I purchased this, but it was only when I purchased this, it was only 25 years since the start of the war. So less than 20 years, from the end of it. And the war was far more alive in people's memories and their kind of consciousness than certainly it is now. But when you think how it so easily invokes memories, of mine that are over 50 years old, how it must have resonated with people, who most of the people alive in 1964 would have lived through the war. Both my parents served in various armed services, during the war. It was a major kind of event in everyone's lives, and even if you were born after the war, as I was, you were still familiar with all the kind of marks and memory, not just people's memories and talking about the war, but the physical scars of the wars in terms of bomb sites and so on, and people, lots of kind of people with obvious injuries, lost limbs and so on, as well as the kind of mental effects that it had on some people. So it was the war was far more in people's memories, and yet this book, I think we have, this is the foreword by Montgomery. He wrote the foreword to this magazine, and he doesn't kind of this written piece here doesn't it doesn't kind of commemorate the war in the way that you would expect it to be commemorated nowadays. It's far more what's the word? It's far more kind of stern in terms of like he actually addresses a chapter to people, the young of the 1960s, the people in their 20s who were born, after the war or just sort of during it. And it says, but the lessons of the past are soon forgotten. Young men now 20 years old find it difficult to visualize what went on in Hitler's war, and 1914 is as remote to them as the Crimea. The pictures in this book may help them, and there are priceless lessons to pass on, whose learning costs many lives, and whose neglect might cost the same again. That appeasement, from the days of long ago to those of Hitler, will not hold off a tiger, that the keys of peace are in the hands of strength. Now, as I say, nowadays, commemorations of the Second World War are really all to do with, to a large extent anyway, with the poppy appeal, as far as I can tell. And people are very sort of swift to tell you the reasons why people died, and it's usually that they died to kind of create the world we have today. So in a way, they're kind of politicizing the commemorative process. They're trying to tell you that people died so that we have the kind of privileges that we have nowadays, and if you're not content with the world as it is now, that somehow you're dishonoring the kind of sacrifice that those people made. So it's kind of the commemoration has sort of morphed into a kind of conservative with a small c kind of message behind it. But you can see in Montgomery's message at the time, 25 years after the war, so a long time ago, that he was really more keen to sort of stress, not to fall into the mistakes that occurred in the 1930s. And in the 1960s, appeasement was really blamed for the tragedy of the Second World War, that if we had maintained our armed forces and not reduced our spending on armed forces and kept pace with Hitler's rearmament of Germany and confronted him when he began his aggressive moves, such as the move into the Rhineland, that the Second World War probably wouldn't have happened. And how much does that kind of echo what has happened with Putin and the current war in the Ukraine? It's sort of it's sort of a lesson that we did forget. That as time has gone by, we've kind of changed our understanding of what the Second World War was all about and the reasons why it happened, and we're paying the price for it now, or at least the Ukraine is, but might quite soon be other parts of Europe as well. So that was what struck me about that first page. But anyway, let's get on to showing you some of the pages in this book, all of the pages in this book, because some of the photographs in here I just think are so striking and so remarkable. And one of the things that frustrates me in particular about especially World War II documentaries that you see on television nowadays, that film footage in particular, but images as well, are often used because they're stock images and they're used out of context with the subject that they're actually discussing. So for instance, you might have you might have a documentary about the Bismarck and the Battle of the Denmark Straits and the sinking of the Hood, for instance. But so much of the footage would be of pictures of, say HMS Ark Royal, but not during the chase of, for the Bismarck. It might be of pictures of the Ark Royal in the Mediterranean or something like that. And that's a sort of very kind of almost a forgivable error. But you will get pictures of, say, fighting in one theatre that's meant to represent fighting in another. So pictures of Japanese infantry fighting in Burma, for instance, it's meant to be representing them fighting in the Philippines or whatever, just because it's sort of jungle setting. And that I do find that frustrating, especially when you can identify a picture and know where it was taken and know that it's out of context. And then you get the even more kind of crass mistakes, like showing pictures of I don't know, an American tank when it's meant to be representing a British tank or something like that. But all the pictures in here, they are in context of what the captions are describing. I'm not saying that some of them weren't staged. I mean, it's pretty obvious here that these WAF forces here manning this anti-aircraft gun. Oh no, it's Wrens, I beg your pardon. It's an anti-aircraft gun being manned by Wrens, but it's pretty clear that is a kind of staged. They're posing for the camera in a way. It's not. They're not sort of firing at an aircraft in real life, but at the same time, they are very sort of evocative of the time and the period and the spirit of the troops and so on. Some of the pictures are very iconic. I mean, this one in particular, on the beaches of Dunkirk, is particularly common in history books and on TV and so on. One of the things that shook me at the time, I'm not sure if it actually... Yeah, this guy here, it does mention it here. This particular chap here, you think that he is actually just sort of presenting his rifle to the skies and shooting at a plane, which he is attempting to do. But he's actually just been hit and killed by strafing. And it mentions that here. So they weren't sort of shy of showing pictures of dead and wounded and even dying people in the Second World War, far more than they were in the First World War. I mean, not that photography was so commonplace in the First World War, but there are sort of some pictures in this book which are actually quite shocking and show real conflict and so on. They're not all posed. Pictures of the dead on Dunkirk's beach here. Yeah, I'll just go through some of the pages though and show you some of these other ones. This is again is a classic picture of the Graf Spee after it was scuttled. You see that quite commonly in on TV and in books and so on. Some of the pictures in here though aren't that commonplace. Beautiful picture there of a flight of hurricanes. Backdrop of the clouds. Fighter pilots scrambling to their aircraft again. That could be a posed photograph. You don't know. Probably more likely to be a real event taking place. I mean, there's some footage of from a gun camera of a Focke-Wulf being shot down. So that presumably that isn't the Battle of Britain. So I might have to take back what I was saying about pictures being shown out of context, but this magazine wouldn't have had much other excuse to put footage in, apart from in the chapter on the Battle of Britain. Contrails in the sky over London, presumably. That's a very, beg pardon, shaking the camera. This here is a very evocative picture of a Dornier that presumably attempted a forced landing on the beach in the south coast. This is the bar exploding. Now this footage, this is actually a still from the film footage. The bar was torpedoed and turned over, and then the magazine exploded, and it was all filmed from a plane flying overhead. But that in particular is shown over and over and over, even in documentaries of the Battle of Jutland, which took place in the First World War, obviously. But that exploding ship image, because all you can see is the explosion, is used so much, out of context. Another famous picture of St Paul's Cathedral defying the bombs as the surrounding London burns. And here we go into some more pictures of the Blitz. So obviously that couldn't be staged. That must have been at the time, the building collapsing. Yeah, it does kind of explain in a way, I suppose, why I feel particularly disturbed by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, because the pictures like this are just repeating themselves now on our, the current news footage. And when I saw these pictures as a boy, the war was a very kind of, as Montgomery says in the foreword, it was a very kind of distant event for a 10-year-old, even though there were, sort of the signs of it all around you growing up. But it was something that you never imagined would occur again in Europe. And here we are, with the calamity that's going on in the Ukraine at the moment. Again, pictures of the dead. This is a fireman who was killed in a bomb blast near Waterloo Bridge. People being rescued from the ruins. That's an amazing picture there of wounded firemen and so on receiving attention at first aid posts. Well, that almost looks like a still from a movie. People sleeping in the underground, exactly the same as the images we saw of the metro in Kiev. This is the chapter on the sinking of the Bismarck. So that picture is actually the Bismarck firing on the hood, taken from the photograph taken from the Prinz Eugen. Desert War. So again, it's kind of a mix of well-known photographs and ones that aren't so commonly available nowadays. You can imagine as a 10-year-old boy, you know, it was a fantastic resource to have, really. As I say, as Montgomery says, very kind of evocative picture. You know, every picture tells a story. It's not that you don't need any text, really. Again, this is a famous photograph. You often see that, but stirring nonetheless. And again, photographs that couldn't have been faked, really. There's various aspects of naval warfare. So you've got the sinking of the Ark Royal there. Oh, this is the picture of the Prince of Wales sunk by a Japanese aircraft in the Far East. That's a picture that you commonly see as well in documentaries about the Atlantic War, but even this magazine doesn't actually say where and when it was taken. It's just such a descriptive image of sort of sailors trying to clamber up onto, you know, to safety from an oil slick and a drenched dinghy. Meeting at Yalta. Again, this is taken from a film footage, bit of a Chindit with his mule going past the camera. My father was film. He was a Chindit, and he said that he did walk past a camera crew filming once. So it's probably this same kind of period, but he didn't make it into the film, the film footage, the history, the reels, but is no doubt somewhere in this column. This next section's about Diep, which has often been kind of it's interesting actually. I saw a very good documentary about Diep a few years ago that was made by a Canadian film company, and they came up with this sort of novel idea that originally Diep has either been presented, I mean it was a calamity, and it's always been, or previously it had always been presented either as a kind of rehearsal for D-Day, so that the Allies could learn lessons from it, and so it was just a sort of testing the water, as it were, and seeing what they would need to finesse when it came to D-Day, or it's been presented as a kind of a way of keeping Stalin on board, really, because he was insisting on a second front being opened, and they decided to stage this raid to show Stalin that they were still they weren't being idle in the West, on the Western Front. But this Canadian documentary came up with another idea that it has been kept secret, ever since, that the German Enigma machine had been enhanced and developed, so it went up from, I can't remember whether it was 2 cylinders to 3 or 3 cylinders to 4, but there was a period when it was a lot harder to interpret captured messages and so on, intercepted messages, and the Allies knew that the Navy had an Enigma machine in their kind of headquarters, which was on the quayside in Diep, and the raid was actually a diversion for a smaller party of men trying to get into Diep and capture this Enigma machine. So it was a sort of smokescreen for that. Had they just gone straight for the Enigma machine, it would have alerted the Germans to the fact that the Allies had been intercepting their messages and so on, and were still able to. So the raid was a kind of diversion for that as well, which is an interesting kind of take on it. And it does sort of, in a way, although it failed in its objective, it does give more meaning and sense to the sacrifice that the troops at Diep made. Again, another famous picture that you often see. This is another quite shocking image of German snipers found his target at Anzio, but the corporal got his revenge. So this guy here has actually been shot through the head. You can see the blood sort of puddling onto the sand. Picture of the ruins of Monte Cassino. This is the bombing campaign, Allied bombing campaign in Germany. Oops, sorry, missed the page. This is a remarkable picture here that you can see that it's a picture taken from a plane downwards of another plane, a bomber, Halifax bomber, and it's completely lost its right tail wing. Half its tail has been shot away, and yet it did manage to get home successfully. This is another famous picture of a mosquito attack on a Gestapo headquarters in Denmark. Sort of precision attack. And D-Day, again, iconic picture you see quite a lot of. I think half the reason these pictures aren't so common nowadays is that TV documentaries will try to go more for moving footage, so film footage, whereas a lot of these pictures are photographs. You know, some of them are stills from film, but a lot of them are actual photographs that would have been taken for newspapers of the day. So they're not quite as attention drawing as a moving image. These are Canadians landing on the beaches of Normandy. Then we're on to the kind of second Blitz almost of London, the terror weapons, the V1 and the VT. Again, that's another one that you very often see. Usually it has to be said in context. It's a British paratrooper firing a mortar. Linking up with the Russians. And there's Montgomery again, who wrote the foreword for the book, taking a field marshal's surrender, and the fighting continuing in the Far East. Picture of Australians in New Zealand, in New Guinea rather, sorry, and New Zealanders there. And then the atom bomb. Yeah, so I just thought I would show you that. I thought you might be interested in nothing else, if not the pictures alone, which I think are quite remarkable. But as I say, it did bring back a lot of well, it sort of sparked a lot of varying sort of thoughts in my mind going through this as well, in relation to the sort of current crisis in the Ukraine, and a sort of nostalgic memories of my childhood. Thanks very much for watching, everyone. Bye for now.